Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Brandon Shank, and welcome to the Brandon Shank Podcast. What up, everybody? Welcome to the Brandon Shank Podcast. As always, Brandon Shank here with my main man, Corey, in Nakona.
What's up?
Hello,
hey,
Corey, in Nakona.
Cool? Want to see something cool I figured out?
Yes. Oh.
Just for the people watching the videos, or you can like double. You can sad.
How'd you do that?
Rain.
How'd you do that?
Or
That's cool, man.
You can rock out at a rock concert with a laser show.
Oh.
You can do it right now. Just do double thumbs up. You got it.
Wow.
Look at that.
Look at that. Man, learn something new every day.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Just for our those watching the video. Just fun.
Sweet.
If you didn't know your
video
camera
watchers.
can do that.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. So if you do a fist pump, nothing?
Yeah, that doesn't work.
How about a happy face? Nothing. That's sad.
Nope.
That's sad. Well, I want to start off today by talking about something that hit me hard this week. I was at a farmer's market while my wife and I were on vacation, and this farmer's market had a ton of samples. Who doesn't love samples, right? And it took me back to the days whenever Costco, it used to be Price Club back in the day, or Sam's Club. When I lived in D.C., we used to go there and get samples, right? You go as a kid, your parents are shopping, you go and hit up the meatballs, the shrimp, whatever they have. It's one thing when people are serving them, but you know what I've realized? I think at 42, I don't know that I care for samples anymore. Now, I was at a Hershey's ice cream place, and they gave me a sample scoop of Hershey's. That's different. But I don't know if I just care about open-air samples anymore. I think it's just, I think I'm over it, man. Is that something only kids like, or?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm with you on that one too. I don't care about it.
Yeah, it just kind of turned me off. I was like, samples covered, flies everywhere, even though they're covered. I'm not feeling it. There's nobody tending the sample station. I was just over it.
You keep going around.
You know what I mean?
Get like a whole meal as a child.
Yeah, as a child, or some grown people do that. But so, hey man, so you're coming in hot today. I have a topic I want to hit, but before I do, I'd like to know what kind of fun fact you're bringing to us this morning, this afternoon, or evening.
So, have you heard about the? I'm trying to be as broad as possible, not give it away. But have you heard about the police incident? There's a driving incident in Ohio that happened 2 days ago.
I have not.
Okay. All right. Well, this is awesome. So I came across this on a news article. There was someone who desperately, for some reason, had to get to Target. And I was watching a video, and it was dash cam video of a guy, and he was driving, and he calls 911 talking about an erratic driver behind him. And he's following along with his driver. Basically, he's like, yeah, they're just swerving all over the road. Man, they're losing it. Like, I just don't want someone to get hurt. Eventually does the car pulls off to the side. And so he does a U-turn, turns around to keep with the car because he's still on the phone with the police officers. Well, the car passes him, and he's like, I think that's a child. And so 2 days ago,
Target?
yeah, there was an 8-year-old girl that drove to Target, which is wild in and of itself. But
apparently,
come to find out, a couple fun facts about this. She drove herself about 25 minutes. She made it 25 minutes. That is
impressive.
Absolutely impressive. That no one would make a phone call except for this one person, and she made it all the way to Target.
It shows you how bad of drivers we've got out there, folks.
Yeah, she was missing since 7 a.m. But the Bedford police wrote this statement, which I thought was fun. They said, well, I finally found a woman who's in more of a hurry to shop at Target than my wife. More of a hurry by 8 years. That's right. An 8-year-old took mommy's car this morning and drove to Target in Bainbridge to shop. Thankfully, she made it and was immediately located by the Bainbridge police. She's now home safe. Not sure what she bought or if she was even able to use her Target app to save 5%. We did let her finish her Frappuccino. We're not mean.
That's impressive.
So
got to finish the crap.
Here's some information that a lot of there was only like one news article that I found this, and it was more of a local news article. She had $400. She took $400 to Target to shop. I mean, you got $400. I get it. I understand.
Inflation's real. Inflation's real.
Yeah,
so she understood. She understood the moment. You got to give the girl credit. I mean, I like this. I like this young lady. I'm all for it.
Yeah,
I'm all for it.
And I'll say this: I watched the video. There's a point where she gets in front of the dash cam driver who's calling 911. And you know what? For an 8-year-old, not bad. Not bad. That's all I got to say. Not
I don't
bad.
think any of my kids at 8 years old could reach the pedals.
That's what I'm saying.
That's she must be 5'7".
Yeah, she was. It wasn't bad. I was kind of impressed. She definitely went into the other lane of traffic, which is dangerous, but I was expecting a lot worse. So
I just want to know what happens when you're 8 years old sitting at home. You know what? I think it's time. I'm going to Target. I'm doing this.
Exactly.
This is my moment.
Exactly.
This is my moment.
I think it's impressive for an 8-year-old to even know what to do in a car, to get it to move, to get it to go anywhere. Like, I think that's impressive.
My 9-year-old Makai, I think he could probably take my truck and put our fifth wheel on it and drive halfway across the country. I think he could do it.
She did tell the police officer that she took out a mailbox. So she did hit a mailbox somewhere along.
And it seems like she wasn't too ashamed of it.
No,
hey, officer, you might want to call Bill back on Holland Street. I took his mailbox out.
Yeah.
Here's $400.
They're still investigating it. She's too young to be charged. So yeah, I don't know what'll happen, but it's just kind of a crazy story.
Dude, I tell you what, it's a scary day to be a parent, because if your kids do something that is something that would be adulting, you get charged, So it's a scary day, and I can't wait till my kids turn 18. I don't trust them. I don't want to be charged for something they do. No parent does. Come on.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Nobody wants to be responsible for that. Well, listen, we're going hard in the paint. I have I want to talk about something that a lot of times. So for this podcast, I think we're continually finding our lane. And what I mean by that is different people will ask for different things, different topics. Can you speak on something or have a question, which is great. And we love doing that. But when I prepare messages for the weekends, or if I'm preaching somewhere, you can always feel when a room shifts. You can always feel when there's something you talk about or something that you address that all of a sudden everybody's interested in. But even bigger than that, you feel quick opinions or divides or immediate reactions. And I don't consider myself a professional communicator as a pastor, but the reality is you're publicly speaking every week, sometimes multiple times a week. And as you do that, you learn a lot about people. You learn a lot about communicating to large groups of people, and or people in general. I mean, I basically communicate all the time, whether it's in staff meetings or all that to say, there's a topic I want to talk about because we just celebrated our 10th year at Palms Church this year since we started the church. It was an incredible feat. I think that it's really the only reason. I'm not great at celebrating, but I'm all about let's charge, keep going. But the Lord's very clear. He's like, man, this is about me. It's about my faithfulness. Celebrate my faithfulness. And I think we did that. I think it was a great day. Incredible. People, just so cool to see all the faces there and all the people that have been a big part of the church for so long. But something that I've noticed in the 10 years that I have pastored, which honestly, it's not that long of a time, but it's 10 Christmases, 10 Easters, 10 cycles, right? What I've learned is that right now, our country, and this is not a political podcast. I say that out loud because I want to make sure that the angle is right. We are Jesus culture sports. That's what we do, right? On a sports note, I think the NFL, whoever wins the Super Bowl this year, is going to be the healthiest team. I'm just saying that. I think it's a wild card this year. You never know. It's either going to be the Chiefs or everybody else. That's my prediction. Hail to the Commanders. But when this topic, when it comes up, it is the most interesting, and involved topic in the 10 years that I've been a pastor, that when I mention, the room just stops. And it freezes. And it's the election. Presidents. politics. And I'll never preach on political. Everything you preach out of the Bible is political, right? And people say, well, Jesus isn't political. They're right, but the Bible is a divider. Everything you teach is about helping people or about saving lives or about, lay down your life for your friends or love your neighbor as yourself. Like those are, if the Bible is not the moral code, then there wouldn't be such a divide on politics, I think, a lot of times, because I think that people are constantly trying to, they're saying, well, separate church and state. Like, this is a big deal, guys. Like, we get it. But I think I want to go deeper than that. I don't want to get into, I'm not really interested personally about what everybody thinks, because you have your own opinions, and I'm not going to sit here and share what I think, because I don't think that's what people are asking. I think where I'm at is why are people so amped up about the election? Now, I could make a phone call and I could call 10 different people and they could probably talk for an hour straight without interruption as to why they feel like it's important. But I don't even want to talk about the election. I want to talk about politics. I want to talk about presidents. And I want to talk about, when I mentioned this, even this past weekend, I made the statement, I don't even know who I'm voting for. I feel like you either vote for a predator or you vote for abortion. And both of them I have feelings against. I mean, you can say what you want. But Donald Trump has absolutely done things that make him predatorial to women. I don't care what anybody says. It's proven. It's fact. You can support him. And I'm not saying that you can't. I'm not saying you're a bad person for supporting him. It's fact. You can support Harris. For me, abortion is something that is just overwhelming. And all the times, it's just it's an overwhelming topic for me, because I feel like no matter any way you cut the cookie, it is taking a life. I don't care, people. I don't care when you think life starts. I'm telling you, God gives life. It takes life. I think there are, on both sides of the debate, there are things that I agree with, right? And there are things that I am passionately against. And I made this statement, and I stand by it, that I don't even know who I'm voting for. I feel like no matter what I vote for, I don't feel good about my vote when I leave, right?
Yeah.
I think me and my wife will just vote for different candidates to delete our vote, but to say we voted.
Split it up.
Split it up. My point is this: politics have divided people that love God but don't love each other. And therefore, you can't convince me they truly love God. You can't tell me that you're in love with God when you can't love people. And I know people that go to church that are passionate, that they love God, but they cannot stand people that don't vote the way they vote. They hate those people.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how in the world, over time, how has this been such a dividing thing for people? I'm scared to bring it up. I don't ever bring it up. And they always say don't talk religion or politics at the Thanksgiving table for a reason. But I guess my question is, a lot of people who claim to be Christians that are passionate about a certain candidate, I find that they're more passionate about politics than they are about Jesus. Because if it's the other way around, your goal is not to convert them to a political party, it's to help people see the love of Jesus in you. But I have seen people make the love of Jesus secondary to preference.
Yeah.
And I know the minute I make statements like this, people's opinions are drawn. I don't really get a lot of hate mail, honestly. I don't think people care. I think it's just more of, I think I'm sitting here as a 42-year-old. I got 4 boys. And do I care? Yeah, I want our country to be led well. I know for some of you, it's a money issue. You guys, whether it's Social Security or you have businesses, you're like, well, it's a money thing for me. I get that. For others, it's a moral thing. I get that. And not saying that the money's not moral. I get all of it. I'm not sitting here throwing stones at anybody based on who you're voting for. I think your reasoning is your reasoning. And just like my 11-year-old said, hey, it's your perception, but does that mean it's the right reality, or is that just your perception?
Yeah.
And like any good parent, I say, man, shut up. Ain't nobody asking you.
I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. But I'm sitting here asking you because if you're listening to this podcast, I want you to ask yourself, why does it matter so much? Like, why does it matter so much that your candidate gets in the office? Why? Like, tell me why. I understand. Listen, I can get politically charged. I can get passionate about particular things. I can get passionate about the fact that I think Donald Trump divided this nation as much as any president in the time I've been alive. I think he made it there was a lot of racial things. There was a lot of comments he made. There was things he does. I don't think he's a great person. I don't. But I also think Donald Trump did a lot of great things for the economy, right? He did a lot of great things for other areas. I think that the Democratic Party in general does a lot of good things for people who don't have as much as others. They do a lot of the good things to help people who aren't just sucking off the government and trying to suck off all the algae. They're actually people who need real help, and the government's trying to help them. Because honestly, I think there is a gap in here that the local church has failed to fill that the government is filling. And so you can complain all you want about the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but the reality is the local church, there is a gap in our country that the government has filled that I believe that the local church can fill in helping people and reaching people. And I'm not saying, I keep thinking of the scripture and I can't get it out of my mind. Give to Caesar what's Caesar, give to God's what's God's. It's what Jesus said. He's saying you give to the government what they're asking for and you give to God what he's asking for. And I think there's this overarching concept of faith of God's going to take care of you. Stop worrying about how you can take care of yourself. But you have people who claim to know Jesus that are they're so passionate about this because they're like, well, what about all these things that are going to happen? What about all the immigrants coming into our country? Yeah, what about them? What about them? All these people who are, well, these immigrants, I heard they're in Chicago. They get $5,000 a week. I don't know if that's even true. I heard that through the grapevine. I mean, what if it is? Well, that's our money and this and this. So give me what's mine. Don't help people who need it. Listen, what do you think the people beside you at your workplace are doing that don't work as hard as you, but they make the same money as you and you get frustrated at them? How are they any different? The Bible says love your neighbor. It doesn't say love your neighbor that speaks the same language. It doesn't say love your neighbor who works as hard as you do. It doesn't say love your neighbor who has the same racial profile as you are. It doesn't say love your neighbor that's not in prison for murder, being a predator, or money laundering. It doesn't say love your neighbor based on your opinion of that person and your perception. It says love your neighbor as yourself, which means you will do for them anything you would do for your family. Wow.
Yeah.
And what politics does and what our election does, I hate this time of year. I'll tell you why. Because like every church, every person, man, I got friends in and out of the church. Like people are passionate about these things, and they just think they know so much. But at the end of the day, I don't care what you say. When there's that kind of anger behind passion, you can't convince me that there's a love that's motivating it.
Yeah.
It's a selfishness that's motivating most of our political views, not a love. I very rarely hear people talk about who they're going to, and it's based out of love and like how they care for people. It's generally based out of anger and how they don't want people to have what they have, that they don't deserve it, or those people aren't good enough. And I just want I want you to turn around. I want you if you're listening right now, I want you to really take a deep look inside yourself. And I want you to say, why is it that I have this strong opinion about this particular thing? Like when you really trust God to be the one to provide for you, then what is it about you giving all that you are and have to others to help their life be better and to help them be better what God has for them? Why is there this feeling that, well, I won't have what I have then? Who says? Like if the principle of love your neighbor as yourself, if that's a principle that God put in place, and what makes you think that that's not the principle to fulfillment and the principle to things that you could never have without God? You feel me? Mm-hmm. These aren't statements God makes because you need to do this to be in good attention and good behavior. No, these are statements he makes to say, you want a life of fulfillment? Then why is it that we stop with blessing? Why is it that we have a level of which we're willing to help others? Why is it that instead of our kids getting all of the Christmas presents, instead of giving to a family who doesn't have as much and our kids get a little less, we're like, well, I'll give to a family, but I'll stop at the place where it starts dipping into what my kids have. Just asking for a friend.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think the kingdom of heaven, whatever, it's often described as the upside down kingdom, or, it's not of this world. And so I think politics is a trap, dude. It's just, again, I'm not trying to say that it is not important to the country you live in. I'm not saying that, but to fall into the trap of I am a Republican Christian, I'm a Democratic Christian, I'm a that's not the purpose of the kingdom of God. And we've lost all sight of the fact that God's kingdom is God's kingdom for a reason, because you have to sacrifice your flesh on a daily basis to follow his kingdom. And I think everything you're speaking on is, it looks like sacrifice. It looks like actually loving your neighbor, even though they don't believe the same things you believe in. Like, we're so tribal and so like, no, I only hang out with people cliquey. Like, it's a trap, man. It's a trap. And
Well, and let me say
people
this.
have fallen
So,
prey to it.
well, and I agree, but let me say this. A couple years ago, I woke up in the morning and God gave me a picture. This was when we lived in Missouri. My wife was a resident director at Evangel University. I woke up that morning. We didn't have a lot of money. There was a 5-year stint where my wife and I didn't have enough money to go to coffee shops. We just didn't have any money. She was working. I was traveling as an evangelist. And honestly, I was running from my calling. Like God had called me. There was an awesome church in Missouri who had offered me an opportunity to be on staff, and I could have traveled as well, and I wouldn't do it. I was just running. I was scared. There was stuff I was going through in my life, but God provided for us. But anyway, we were at a time in our life where we had nothing. And I woke up and God gave me a picture of a house. And I don't get a lot of visions like that. I get them, but it's not like every day or every week or every month. This is a rare thing. And so I woke up and it was just kind of this quick picture that I got of image of a house. And so that day I knew what road that it was supposed to be on. And I was like, there's no way this house is actually on this road. And I knew it was a particular house. Like methamphetamine is a huge issue in Missouri, and especially where we used to live. These people with meth labs, these houses would blow up and like their windows would blow out. It would happen because these labs would blow up. And this picture of this house God gave me was a house with curtains hanging in the window or blankets. And my assumption was it was a meth house. I didn't know that. That was just my assumption. So I got in my car and I drove down the road and I turned right on this road that I thought it was going to be. And about 7 or 8 houses in, right at the corner of the road, before you come to the end of the street, I looked to the left and there was that particular house that God showed me in when I woke up. I said, well, Lord, what do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to provide. I'm going to provide through you. I said, well, I don't have anything. Like my wife and I couldn't even afford to go. I mean, literally, we could not go. We would go to a coffee shop to hang out with friends, and I'd buy like 1 cup of coffee for like $1.20, and I would have to use change because I didn't have money. We did not have money. We were in the red for years because I refused to go into the churches, and I was just fighting my calling. And we just the manna that God provided was we were able to eat at the school all the time. Like we had a bag of quarters that we reached into that somebody gave us for our wedding. I put it in the closet. We'd reach in there and grab quarters out for food on the weekends, and it never ran out in 4 years. That's a whole other story. But I'm just telling you the story about this house because I want you to understand really why I have such a passion about these things. And so I said, okay. And so I drove to a grocery store. I drove to Walmart, and I was in Walmart getting groceries. And I said, well, Lord, what do you buy people? What do you buy? And I asked him, I said, what do you buy poor people? That's exactly what I told him. And he said, Brandon, they eat the same things you do. He said, I want you to buy them the best. I said, okay. So I got steaks, good healthy meats, good fruits and vegetables. I got them stuff that I'd want. Like if you were going on a shopping spree for your home, what would you get? You know, how do you get some Oreos, some Doritos? Come on, somebody. And my wife, I was in this grocery store, and she knows we don't have any money. And I'm pushing my cart, and she looks over. My wife shows up at Walmart, not knowing that I was there. And she looks at me, and I have a cart that's heaping with groceries. And she says, what are you doing? And she's chuckling. I said, the Lord told me to take groceries to people. She goes, I don't even want to know. She goes, I'll see you at home. And she just laughed because Casey knows. And my wife, when she knows it, like when God, she just trusts it, but she knows, like she has that. And I love her so much for it. Like that it wasn't like we can't afford it. It was like, I got you. So I bought the groceries and I went to this house and I started unloading them. But there was like this beware of dog. There was this fence in front of the house. And so I was like, I'll just unload these at the fence. If God can give me a vision of this house and take me to Walmart and buy a bunch of steaks, he can show them that there's groceries here at the store. I'm not going up there. So I pull up my car and I start unloading these groceries at the front of this fence. And I'm on my third time going back to my car to get groceries. And somebody opens up the door. He said, hey, what are you doing? Big dude. I said, hey, man, I said, I just really felt like I should bring you groceries. I said, honestly, I was praying this morning and God gave me a picture of this house and he told me to buy groceries. And, I didn't want them to feel like, a lot of people have a lot of pride. You don't want to feel like, well, you're getting a handout or, you couldn't provide. And it was a man. And so I said, I just want to bring him. He said, what did you say? And I said, well, I was praying this morning and God gave me a picture of this house. And he said, no. He said, God told you to bring those groceries here. I said, yes, sir. And as he's talking, his wife walks behind him. And I start telling him the story. And then after that, a woman walks behind him. It looks like she's probably 20 years younger than them, probably in her 40s. And I keep talking. And then there's a man that walks behind her. And as I'm telling the story, then there comes a kid out. I mean, this whole family just starts filling the porch of this house. And he said, well, let's go get him. And so he opens up the gate and I start carrying him up to the porch. And this lady looks at me. He goes, man, I can't even tell you. He's like, I'm overwhelmed. He goes, I'm just overwhelmed. And the lady who came out behind this older guy, she said, when you pulled up to the door, we were all sitting around the table and we had one can of beans left for the next week. Our Social Security checks don't come until next week and we have nothing. And we didn't know how we were going to make it. We didn't know what we were going to eat this week. And we were just like, well, God, if you're there, if you're real, do something. And she said, and you showed up to the door. I had nothing when I did that. My wife and I had nothing. And I look back at stories like that and I ask God, Lord, help me to never, ever, I don't want to just remember those stories. I don't ever want to stop living those stories. Because people have done that for my wife and I. You know, we were at that same college. We had no money. And I remember one night we were in the living room of our home. And it was about 6:30 at night. We were holding hands. We were getting ready to go walk down to the cafeteria to eat dinner with a bunch of our friends. And we were holding hands. We said, Lord, we have nothing. And listen, we had nothing because I wasn't willing to do what he told me to do. I want everybody to understand that. And he said, we have nothing. We need you to provide. We don't know what we're going to do. We have no extra income. As soon as we said amen, we heard a knock on our door. And my wife walks over to the door and there's an envelope on the floor. And we pick the envelope and look at it and there's about $180, $170 in cash in ones and fives, a couple of tens. Had no idea where the money came from. And we found out a couple weeks later, maybe it was the next week, a kid came up and said, hey, or my wife had said, where did this money come from, to one of her resident directors? And she goes, oh, well, a lot of the kids on this campus, you guys have made such an incredible impact. Somebody just said, we need to give them something just to thank them for what they've done for our lives. And they just asked kids for any money they had. We never asked for anything. They just wanted to say, hey man, these people have done incredible things for us. They just lead us well. They love us. And that wasn't even our role. We were just there working. And these kids dropped all this cash off at our door. And I'm telling you, man, I have story after story like that in my life, in my wife's life, that whenever I hear the whole politically charged thing, my biggest fear is that I grow, and as my life grows and as my financials grow and I have more kids to take care of, just 4, there's no more, but I have 4 kids to take care of. I don't ever, the stakes continue to get raised because now they're eating and my kids aren't, right? They were eating and my wife and I knew at the end of the day we were going to eat because the cafeteria was right down the road. We may not eat on Saturday mornings for a couple of weeks, but we were going to eat. I don't ever want to lose that. I don't want to lose that heart of loving your neighbor as yourself, of buying the best instead of taking to the food pantries the worst stuff you would never eat and just hoping somebody who needs a lot would eat it. If you don't like canned Brussels sprouts, they're probably not going to like canned Brussels sprouts, right? I personally don't know if I would. I love Brussels sprouts, so try me. That's just an example. But a lot of times we give people the worst because it makes us feel good about our donation. And what Scripture says is love them as yourself. Lay down your life for your friends, meaning if I have a steak and a hamburger, I'm going to give them the steak. I'm going to give them the best that I have because that's what God does. Mm-hmm. And it's just a different concept. And I think when I hear of these politically charged arguments, it's all us versus them. It's all you're trying to take from me. And what if the narrative got switched of I want to give to you? And that doesn't mean you don't vote for who you want. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not even getting into that part of it because that's quite frankly is personal. It's who you want. Vote for who you want, right? Yeah. Everybody, there's a lot of people going to heaven that don't agree on politics. But what about loving your neighbor as yourself? What about giving things that you don't even have to give? What about giving to where it doesn't take from your family? You don't realize giving things that were meant for your kids to other kids, how much God's going to do for your family because of that. Your kids will have exceedingly abundantly above more than they could ever think, ask, or imagine because mom and dad were faithful, right? And so in my life, my wife and I's life has been marked by that to the point where we live now, it's one of the first places we've ever lived where we feel like we need God every day, but for different reasons. And it's been a super big lifestyle adjustment. We need him just as much. The stress is just as heavy, but it's different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And I understand the topics, but I just wonder, when do we get back to loving people like ourselves? When is that the thing again? When is that the thing that we're doing again?
Yeah. That's good.
And even people listen to this, if you're watching this clip, Tell us your story. Tell me your story. I want to know your story. Go to Palm Church Online, or you go to, and hit, share it with us. Info at Palm Church Online, whatever. Send me your story. DM it. I want to know your story. Like, I want to know the stories that God's doing in your life. I want to know the testimonies that are happening, right? This is a big passion for us. We were talking about it yesterday. Like, I want to know people's stories that listen to this podcast. I want to know people's stories that stumble across this clip that you may never have heard of this podcast before, but this is something that's reaching you. Like, I want to know your story. Like, tell us your story. Like, I want to know what God's doing in your life. I want to celebrate with you. Like, we want to celebrate what God's doing in your life. You know what I mean? There's the power in the testimony. And I think, man, when you love people in a way that you can't ever, when you love people in that kind of way, it changes everything for them, and it changes everything for you. Like, I feel like, there's this place like Paul, I've had a lot and I've had little, but I'm content in all things. Like, when you really live that, I'm telling you, man, that's a biblical principle that you just aren't scared about not having anything. I'm not scared about not having anything, and I'm not scared about having a lot. I'm just not. Yeah. Why? Because it's never made me feel any different, either one. They're all the same, man. Mm-hmm. It's never made me feel any different having a lot or having a little.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so these are the charges. These are the things that I really want people to hear, is like, man, how can I love people in a way that people be like, that person would lay down their life for anybody, not just Christians. They would lay down their life for anybody. It's the right thing to do. Because looking past that hatred is hard, man. Yeah. A lot of people struggle with that, even in your relationships with your family. It's hard to look past hatred, hard to look past frustration, but you can't forgive people and expect them to change. You forgive them and you change. You let God do it in your heart. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I think that's a big thing, is recognizing that. And sometimes hard is the wrong word, but it's usually against the grain of what you want to do. And so, like, immediately you have to recognize that, yeah, there's a slight difficulty to it. Like, an act of kindness, ultimately, especially, man, that story that you told, I can imagine there is a flood of like joy and goodness and peace and that comes from God when you deliver those things. And that's the conversation that takes place. Like, are you kidding me? It is a beautiful reminder of who God is and what he does. But there's difficult decisions to move forward with that. Like, in your mind, like, God, I don't have a lot. Like, okay, like, I'm trusting here. And it's just, man, my hope for people and my prayer for people is like, you've got to step into the difficult things, the difficult conversations, not in like difficult political conversations, just your spirit wants to do or your flesh wants to do the opposite, honestly, of what your spirit should be doing. And so I think that's the first part of the conversation, is like, just open yourself up to the fact that we're striving for comfort when really we need to get a little uncomfortable. And so it's comfortable to be on one side or the other. If I'm honest, like, it's comfortable to just give yourself to one political party or give yourself to one ideology over the other. That's comfortable, because then you're in a group of people that you feel like you can just hide and be safe. You feel like you're part of a fight, but that's not what Jesus ever modeled. And, Jesus has this beautiful way of speaking to both crowds in a way that is challenging and stretching. And, man, I don't know. Walk with Jesus.
Well, I forget what year it was. It was 2 or 3 years after we moved down here. We lived in the ocean front, and a hurricane came through. And we didn't have power for 4 days. And I had a generator pump in my house. And we lived in a community where right across from us was the deadliest projects in all of Virginia Beach. Thousands of people live in there.
Excuse me.
And it was pitch dark for a week. And I didn't move into that place. I lived right across the street. I wasn't, even necessarily scared. God protected us there. The people were great, man. We had such great neighbors. I fell in love with that community. I still love them deeply. They mean the world to me. Those people mean the world to me. But I remember going outside in the middle of the night, and my generator cut off. And so immediately I'm thinking somebody's trying to rob us. It's the middle of the night. And it just ran out of gas. So I was a little scared, but I ran out of gas, filled it up. The next day I'm out there. I'm just so mad at God. I'm like, God, are you kidding me? It's been 3 days. We don't have any air. We have no electric. The place is, Virginia Beach was flooded, and our particular part of the oceanfront was like one of the only places. I felt like it was like the last one for them to turn it back on, and I felt like I was just frustrated. And I'm sitting there, and God's like, it wasn't even that God said this part, but it was like, Brandon, you're sitting here mad, and you have a generator running your house right now. You haven't lost anything. You have neighbors asking if they can plug in an extension cord. You have a generator.
Yeah.
And the other side of that, God spoke to me in that moment and said, you can either be a part of the problem or the solution. I've placed you where I've placed you, and you can choose to be a part of it, or you can choose to throw your hands against it. And it was just that clear. Very much like a fatherly love of like, bro, you pick. And said, okay. So that night, I bought, I don't know, me and Casey went and got 60 pizzas or so and just put out tables in our driveway. And hundreds of people were there in the middle of this place where there was no power. We hadn't had power for 3 days. Our driveway was filled with people. We had music going. They were playing basketball. The streets were so packed with people across the road to our house, just people hanging out like a block party, that when the cops came through, because the cops would come through all the time, they had to stop. They couldn't even get through the street because it was so packed with people. And people came up to me. I'll never forget it. There was a guy who came over to me who would hang out there all the time that worked for the city. And he came over to me, handed me cash. And he said, hey, take this. I said, no. He didn't live there. He just had friends there. He said, man, I have watched you for the last couple of years, love this community and love these people. I want to be a part of what you're doing. He said, would you please just take this? And I knew at that moment, God said, don't take what he's trying to bless you with, or don't take away from him the blessing that he wants to be a part of this too. Yeah. And then then somebody else came up to me. I'll never forget this. They walked up to me and they gave me a $20 bill, and they said, they said the name of the girl. They said she couldn't pull herself enough together to give this to you, but she's been living in her car with her 2 kids for weeks, and this is the first meal they've had in a couple of days. And she said you have to give this to him, but she couldn't even come up here to do it. She's so overwhelmed. I'm like, well, I'm thinking, well, you had $20, and it's like, this is all she has. Those are moments, man, that I will never forget for the rest of my life. I don't ever want to stop being the hand of God in moments where I always say, if you want to make a great leadership impact, the greater sacrifice it is for you, the greater impact it'll make on them. Yeah. And I just don't ever want these moments to just be far away from my life. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So this is my final thought.
Here's my final thought.
I actually spoke to our church this past weekend, but there's a verse that talks about leading a quiet life. And it doesn't mean leading a life that doesn't make an impact. It's talking about leading a life where it's God will get the glory, but it's talking about leading a life where you put your hands to work and you just go to grind, man. You do for God. And I think that's the opposite of our culture. Our culture says, man, lead a loud life. Like, we all have social, and we like to follow each other. We like to do fun things on social, and we love it. I mean, a lot of you are watching this clip on one of our social outlets. But leading a quiet life is all about doing things for God and not trying to get the glory, not trying to get your reputation bumped up, not doing it so that your church is in the news for how you've helped others, but just doing it to help others. And when people see the love of God, they will gravitate towards it. A couple of years ago, my wife and I, we had an RV, and it was called RVs for MDs. And there was a lady in Norfolk who was a nurse working the COVID floor, and she needed a place to live. She had 6 kids and a husband, but she couldn't come home every night. And so we took our RV and we put it out back behind her house for her to live in. And the news covered it. They were out there. They did this thing, RVs for MDs, local couple helps us. And we didn't ever do it for that. But there's so many times that God said, hey, let me get the glory for this. And so make sure that people know that I did this, because he wants people to know I care about you. I love you. He's not a narcissistic God. He is a God who wants people to know I am in the details. And so, unfortunately, that nurse ended up getting COVID. She was fine, but she worked on that COVID floor, but she got COVID. She got a small bout of it. And she continued to work on that COVID floor. And the RV was there throughout the whole summer. I think it was like 4 months. We let her use it. And she was just the sweetest lady, had the sweetest family. And I was thinking, what a sacrifice this lady is making for all of society to work on this COVID floor and not be able to go home to her family for months. She could see the house, she could see her kids, but she couldn't touch them. What a sacrifice. And I think a lot of times we think our sacrifice is great, not realizing you're actually making a small sacrifice for someone who's made a bigger one. And I don't mean that in a way of condescension or making you feel like what you're doing, but buying pizzas for a community was such a small sacrifice. We had the money to help. And the Bible talks about if you have the ability to bless others, then don't withhold that blessing from them. And so I just want to encourage everybody today to lead a quiet life, man. Take everything God's given you and love your neighbor as yourself. Give it back to the people around you. And I promise you, your life won't make sense. I told Casey, I said, I just don't want my life to make sense to people. I want people to look at my life and be like, man, it just doesn't make sense how that dude lives the way he lives. I want people to say that. Why? Because you can explain only God, and there's no explanation. Only God. That is the only explanation that I want people to look at my life and say, only God could do that. We make such a big deal of money, but we walk on streets of gold in heaven. So God doesn't think of it the way we think of it. It's a resource. We make it such, the focus isn't stewardship. The focus is giving. We make it about budgeting. God makes it about lives. He makes it about loving. We make it about do this and spend this to be a good steward. Good stewardship means I'm not spending it all on myself. I'm giving to God what is God's. I'm giving him my tithe and offering. I'm giving him what he's asked, and I'm being generous with the things he's given me. It doesn't mean, well, I'm doing for me. I've got a nice future plan. Those things are fine, and there's nothing wrong with them. But what God asks us to do is bigger. We make it it's legalistic when we make it about a specific thing. He's saying, no, I want you to give me. In the Old Testament, he was saying, I need 1/10 of these things. In the New Testament, he said, I want you to give it all. I want all of it. That generosity. And so I hope today, as you're listening to this, you're encouraged, man. I know this is more of testimonies and stories, but I really feel like the Lord's been stirring me like, man, share testimonies with people of what I've done in your life and the lives around you, because people need them. And I hope today you're encouraged, man. God is faithful. I know I heard testimonies yesterday about what God's doing in people's lives up in Oakland, Maryland. I'm hearing testimonies all the time. I heard testimonies yesterday about what God's doing in Virginia Beach. Share your stories. Let us know. Share your stories. We love you. Lord, I pray for each and every person, every listener. Pray that they would know you're with them, you love them, you'll never leave them or forsake them, and that God, you can do things in their life they could never think or imagine doing on their own. In Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, love y'all. See y'all this weekend, 9:30.